Okay. Yeah, that is the deck we used at the answering the call retreat last time because it's really easy to travel with. It's so tiny. We will gather up perhaps the links to the podcasts. Maybe Margot or I will do that kind of as we talk. All of the podcasts are archived in categories, though, if you didn't know that. So it's always indiebirth.org/podcast archives. And every podcast we've ever done is there and it's in a category. So if you would just keep that link in your head, you can find anything you're looking for, because I know the podcast apps don't really keep, they don't keep all of them. There's too many years. So you could find the breastfeeding section and also probably under the mothering podcasts. I have a few. Yeah, there's so many. There's like the tongue tie one, and there's I think I did one recently, right, about night weaning. So thank you, Margot. There they are. So yeah, if you're new here, welcome. Should have started with that. I'm Maren, and Margot and I run this thing together. And these meetings just kind of grew out of a need to, I think, see more community a couple times a month and have dedicated topics. So usually we're good about posting links, how to get to us, how to join our social. We talk about the midwifery school, the doula training, all of the things. So feel free to ask questions, and thank you for asking those. Well, where should we start? There are a lot of questions, which is very, very great.
We'll check them out. I think I got most of the links over in the chat now. Oh, but I can't see the questions because they're like from before I logged on my computer.
Okay, well, let's see. I see a jaundice question. There is a jaundice podcast, Anna, so that would be helpful for you to take a listen to. I
just put the link over in the chat for that too.
Okay. Well, let's see. Maybe chronologically would make sense. Kind of start with the newer baby questions. Nutrition while breastfeeding. Breastfeeding while pregnant. Well, I can share about my experience with that. I've breastfed through many pregnancies, and I guess I can kind of weave it into nutrition in a sense. You do need extra calories while you are breastfeeding and pregnant. That's probably not totally surprising, but it is to some. And there are a lot of reasons that we might need extra calories when we're pregnant, but breastfeeding is one of them. So I don't remember how many it is. And of course, it depends on if you have a toddler, maybe nursing all the time, or if you're just nursing once or twice a day. So I know for me, like the milk supply always went away after the first trimester. And that doesn't mean that I didn't have a baby nursing the whole pregnancy. So you'll have some kids that will nurse through a pregnancy, whether or not there's milk. They don't really care. They're happy to just dry nurse, which, might sound horrible, but I always was fine with it. And then some that don't. Some of my kids would quit once I reached the second trimester and I didn't really have milk. And that's not true for everyone. Some women, maybe they keep milk longer during a pregnancy. But for me, I never did past the first trimester. And I think that's largely hormonal. Sometimes people are like, oh, maybe it's nutrition. Maybe I'm not getting enough. Well, great to double check that. But I think just the hormones of pregnancy sometimes lend themselves to that. And then, of course, at the end of a pregnancy, you're going to have colostrum as per usual. And going into nursing a new baby while you're also nursing a toddler is a whole other topic, and one that I have done many times as well. And I've always found that really enjoyable, actually. Any excess milk that you might feel like you have, the toddler kind of evens it out. And of course, the body is so smart. The body knows when the baby is sucking versus the toddler and can change your milk accordingly, which I still just cannot believe that our bodies are so amazing like that.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, there's so many questions.
And I might have missed it at the very beginning when I was trying to get on, but like, did you say anything just about this topic sort of in general?
Nope. I just had them ask questions because I said there's like 3 million ways it could look.
Right. Yeah, I guess I've breastfed 2 babies and had pretty similar experiences with both. And what do I want to say? I guess working with clients as a midwife, like it's not my favorite topic. Like it feels sort of like there's a lot of just it's one of those, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Sorry, my brain on the eclipse day is working at eclipse level. Just that it's something that's hard to talk about until you've done it, you know? It's like a really, like, how do you ever explain to someone what it's going to be like to nurse a baby before they've done it? And I just had a first-time mom last month give birth, and, you know, just something really common that I feel like I hear from those moms is in those first weeks is like, but this is all I do. Like all I'm doing is nursing. And it's like, yeah, we talked about this prenatally and we told you this is what it was going to be like. And like, but it's all the time. And so there's just some amount of it that feels really like I wish that I could crack the code. And maybe there are people out there, I haven't met them yet, who feel like they have a really great way of like preparing people ahead of time. So anyways, I just wanted to share that. I know that wasn't the question over here, but just in general, breastfeeding feels a little bit like not my forte, I guess I was going to say. And I know there's all, and part of it too is that there's this world out there like lactation consultants and, you know, like IBCLCs and people who, not all of them, but a lot of them act like they have some sort of like holy grail magical recipe for every single problem or struggle or challenge that can come up. And I think a lot of it you just have to work out with enough support alongside you. Just in reference to like the questions about increasing breast milk, although I think the nutrition piece is major for that, and the support and rest piece is huge for that. So
the podcast that we linked called The Things That Create Optimal Breastfeeding, I would highly recommend that if you haven't had your baby yet, if you haven't breastfed a baby yet, if this is your first baby, because it really becomes a huge discussion when you open up this topic and you realize that it's really odd that we talk about breastfeeding just sort of alone, like in its own category, when really it's a huge topic about bonding and attachment and how your birth process happens to go, down to how well connected you were in your pregnancy, down to past trauma you might have in your own body. Like there are so many topics, and not that you have to be aware of all of them. That's not the goal, but that podcast I think is really good at just highlighting some of the minor things that do affect breastfeeding that you might not even know about. And I remember when I recorded that, I actually was thinking of doulas, because there's a lot of doulas out there. Let's say they haven't had their own children, for example, or maybe they have, but they're not great breastfeeding support because they're only focusing on that instead of how the birth goes or how the bonding goes, or, you know, is the baby taken from the mom, or all of these like laundry list of things that do affect breastfeeding, but nobody talks about it because then when you get to breastfeeding, everybody just wants to focus on the latch or the tongue tie or the weight gain. And there's emotional and mental and spiritual issues that we can be aware of before we even breastfeed. So, like you're saying, how do you prepare people? I mean, physically, there's not a lot to do. You could pretend to breastfeed, you could watch someone breastfeed. I mean, watching actually is a great preparation, just being around other women that breastfeed. But I'm saying the preparation that you would do are things that maybe seem like they're not about breastfeeding.
Right. I was going to just share my screen really quick with that slide that we have in the labor blueprint. Just to, again, drive it home, since sometimes people like visuals. So during the labor blueprint, we talk a lot about labor and how it works and how it unfolds optimally. But I always like to remind people that even if we're talking about the birth, we're really also talking about breastfeeding and bonding. And this is, from based in the work of Sarah Buckley, Dr. Sarah Buckley. And the same thing goes for breastfeeding, which we're talking about today. Like, we can't talk about breastfeeding without also talking about birth and bonding, because they go together. And, Mother Nature is equally concerned with all three of these, because if you don't give birth safely, obviously the baby doesn't make it. If you don't breastfeed successfully, the baby doesn't make it. At least this was the case like previously before formula, right? And that's not ideal or optimal. Even in today's world. And then if you don't bond well with your baby, that baby's not going to make it, right? And so these are all just as important. And so, yeah, just in case that's helpful for anyone to cement that into their brain, that, right, the breastfeeding piece is not disconnected from birth, and birth is not disconnected, even if we had another little line here to like pregnancy and prenatal care and all of that as well. So stop sharing, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's always a lot to talk about when we consider just information and learning, versus our own internal wisdom that's in there, and then how we're supported in that. So with breastfeeding, I wouldn't say that that's true, Victoria, but I wouldn't say it's untrue, meaning that, for some people, learning or knowing what you're talking about, like mechanics, might be really helpful. But that's not how we got to this point. We haven't gotten to this point by women studying really any of these things, birthing included. We are just like so disconnected, like as a culture, that we have to figure out how to interpret the knowledge, again, with our experience. So you're not wrong. Of course, you're not wrong. And that's what makes it tricky for a new mom to be like, well, what do I need to know? Well, who knows? Like, you haven't met your baby yet. So there's that. If you're somebody that feels really encouraged by watching videos or learning, you should totally do that. Right. And then there's just as many women that are like, well, women and babies have always figured this out. And with support, I feel confident that I'll be able to do that. I will say, Victoria, to your comment, and in general, and this isn't meant to scare anyone, but I think breastfeeding has become harder for sure I don't know what to say, like, even in my time as a midwife, 19 years ago when I started as a student, I don't remember it being a thing. I don't. I mean, and I had breastfed myself, so I don't think I was like completely out of touch. But these clients had their babies at home and they breastfed their babies. And I too, like, wasn't taught like this is how you help someone, because it wasn't really needed. So fast forward now almost 20 years, I agree with you. Even women that have had really beautiful undisturbed births, there are more breastfeeding problems, whatever that means, like more than ever. And I don't have the answer. I think there's a lot of things to talk about there.
Yeah. And I feel like, oh, am I muted? Yes. I feel like I said this a little bit ago and it maybe feels oversimplistic, but I think the biggest piece is the support piece. And I don't necessarily mean even from a midwife, although that can be invaluable, of course, or a lactation consultant or whoever, but really just like the family support, the partner support, and like this understanding that, oh my gosh, my lighting is really weird here. Sorry, everyone. Just the understanding that this is a full-time job and that it could be challenging, even if it's going smoothly, even if like there's no pain with latching, even if the baby's gaining weight, like just like the physical act of breastfeeding a lot in those first weeks and months can be a huge, it's a huge shift for someone to go from never doing that to doing that like many hours of the day. And so, yeah, I think that is, if there was one thing we could do differently, it would be that. It would be making sure that the partner and the family and extended family, and like, re-villaging, like making sure we're surrounded with lots and lots of good social support, and that all of those people understand that it could be a challenge and that their job is to make it so that the woman can focus on that exclusively in those first, especially weeks. I feel like the challenges I've seen with breastfeeding in clients, it's really like those first 4 weeks. Typically, it's like if we can get to that 4-week mark and you're still breastfeeding, you're going to be fine. But those first few weeks can sometimes be dicey.
I second the postpartum, not just support, but rest and nutrition. And we've talked on other moon circles, and I'm sure will in the future, about some of the perspectives there with healing in the postpartum. So, for example, the Ayurvedic perspective, which I am fond of and I offer my clients, really includes already like lots of breast milk rich foods and easy digestion for the mom and the baby, because babies have never eaten before, right? They're in the womb, they're getting what they need, but they haven't ever ingested milk and they have not digested in that way. So something like the Ayurvedic protocol and those kind of foods can make the baby just overall happier to nurse and not be screaming and colic and, all of these things that definitely can happen. And I've seen them with my own eyes. But taking care of our bodies in that way and that slow pace and less stress and all of that really does affect how the baby breastfeeds and even the milk. So if you're new to those ideas, those would be some other things to look into to support yourself. Yeah, I love Amaya's cookbook. What is it called? Mama's Menu or Mama's Meals? I can never remember for some reason, but she's an Ayurvedic chef and the cookbook is really simple, but it's one I recommend. Thank you. Mama Menu. I recommend it to all of my clients, and we make the rice pudding or rice porridge recipe in there for pretty much everybody. And that's what they eat for the first 3 days. And that might sound weird, and you certainly don't have to do that. But for the people that have tried it, it is definitely something that affects their breast milk and affects breastfeeding. And maybe that's why it's become harder. That's definitely one reason, right? Is maybe people don't have that like cultural background in their healing. And I know I didn't for a whole bunch of my postpartums, my first probably 5 or 6 babies. I didn't know any of this. So I got to see the difference between not doing that and then doing that with a bunch of them. And it really was night and day. And I just didn't know, that isn't like taught in the culture we're living in. So we kind of have to go back in time a little bit and learn, how did women take care of themselves? And like Margot's saying, what was that purpose? Not just to heal our own bodies, but to have that relationship be really strong between mom and baby. and lower her stress. Like she doesn't have to get up and take care of a household. Any kind of like anxiety or stress is going to affect your breastfeeding. It's called Mama's Menu or Mama Menu. I don't remember. A May I Do Pray. Yeah, it's on Amazon, I'm sure.
I wonder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her website I'll put is just called Shakti Care, and actually the rice porridge recipe is on there for free. Just have to find it. That first podcast I mentioned was called All the Things That Affect Breastfeeding or something like that. All the things that create optimal breastfeeding. And again, if you go to indiebirth.org/podcast archives, you can look through all of them. Yeah, thanks, Victoria, for posting that link. That's a course I believe she has on postpartum healing, which I'm sure is really wonderful. I also have like a free postpartum handout on my site. I'll put that, but it's not really about breastfeeding. You can just see it if you want.
I wonder if you want to say more about like the spiritual piece, emotional piece. Someone had shared the question up above, like, I've had some internal fears around breastfeeding being really painful, difficult, painful breastfeeding has even come up in my dreams. I believe it has more to do with fears around being able to care and provide for a child.
Yeah.
Ask what we would suggest for someone that is experiencing painful breastfeeding, but I feel like the question is probably more about this first piece.
Right. Yeah, breastfeeding is like so fascinating. I mean, in general, right? But it's a part of our body, obviously, and it's a part that may hold memories and may keep trauma. So for women that have had sexual trauma, that might be something to unravel. Some people, maybe they haven't even had sexual trauma, but in their mind, in their programming, breasts are sexual. And it's really hard for some women to like sort of figure out how this all works, you know, when breastfeeding is just normal and natural. And, you know, you should be able to feed your baby anywhere you want. Like there's lots of your own personal journey that you kind of have to uncover that may have happened long ago, or again, just belief systems you have. And finally, talking to your mom, if that's an option, and hearing about her breastfeeding journey. Do you know, were you breastfed? That's a huge part of the picture. I had a client not that long ago who was never breastfed more than a day or two. And she distinctly knew the reason, you know, at 30 plus years of age, she knew that she was allergic to her mom's breast milk. That's what her mom was told. That's what she had been told her whole life. So, you know, those are some major belief systems to tackle and decide if you agree with them and, you know, your path going forward as a mother. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for her, she wasn't successful in breastfeeding the first time and wasn't really successful the second time. So, you know, who knows? And that's fine. That's her choice to do that or not. But my point is there was a lot there, and I can't really speak for her if she like unraveled it fully, but it wasn't like there were no issues. Like there were things, big things.
Big things. Yeah, I just wanted to second that piece, especially like the cultural stuff around breasts and being like hypersexualized. And I feel like for me, I had done a lot of work around that and unraveled a lot of that during like, you know, my college years. I was studying women's and gender studies, and Yeah, but even so, like knowing that, I feel like I had those thoughts too going into my first breastfeeding experience. I don't know if it's even thoughts, but more like feelings, just around like, ooh, I don't know if like this is like, ooh, I don't know how it's going to feel, if I'll like how it feels, or if I won't like how it feels, and how I'll feel about how I feel about it. And, you know, like there's just a lot there. And so, just again, to speak to, yeah, there's a lot wrapped up in women's breasts in our culture. And even if you feel like you have a pretty good relationship with them, it's like there's still not a lot of great role modeling happening. And so oftentimes I feel like, and I think I've had clients say this too, like they feel like they're kind of the pioneer in their friend group, or they're the only one they know. Yeah, like I wasn't breastfed past I think 6 weeks, and I doubt it was really even that much in those 6 weeks. And then neither of my sister-in-laws, well, one pumped exclusively, and then the other one I don't think breastfed at all. And so I was the first woman. And my grandmother was told she was a bad cow, and I've heard a lot of people say this, like that this was something that was said in that era. She was told she made a bad cow and that she shouldn't breastfeed, and they gave her some kind of shot to make her milk dry up. And so that was the story that was told to my mom. And I never asked about my other, my paternal grandmother. But so probably I was the first woman to breastfeed in, 3 generations in my family. And so I think that's where a lot of people find themselves. And it's not a small feat, I think, to break that cycle.
That's so true. Looking back at the history in your family for birth and breastfeeding, yeah, and just seeing what women did, if you can uncover that, or how they felt about it, or what they were shamed about, or, it's really pretty sad most of the time. But I think it's a great way to make a conscious shift. I mean, so many women, I'm sure so many here would say, like, I'm not doing it that way. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. So it can be really powerful, and breastfeeding can be an amazing experience to shift that for your family, right? So all of like the hardships we're talking about don't necessarily come in for anyone. To be honest, I didn't find it hard, and I wasn't breastfed, and my mom didn't breastfed my sister or I mean, again, maybe a couple of weeks, not really. I didn't have any friends at the time, because with my first baby, we just, didn't have any friends that had kids yet. And I really didn't find it hard. And I haven't found it hard, which, like you, Margot, it kind of makes me like not the best helper sometimes when someone is truly, really fully struggling, because I run out of ideas after a certain point. But I'm grateful for that experience, because I definitely don't think it needs to be hard. So if it is hard, that's fine. And it can be hard, but it doesn't absolutely have to be hard. So it's a weird place to be before you've had a baby, to not really know if what should you expect, the best or the worst? And, of course, expect the best and be prepared with support and nutrition and all of the things we're talking about, and commit to it. Sometimes it is hard, and it does take a commitment, and it takes like that day commitment. It's not like you have to say, I'm going to keep breastfeeding in 6 months. It's like, no, just today. I'm doing this today. And when I get to tomorrow, I'll talk about tomorrow, because yeah, for some women, it is super challenging.
I don't know that I ever like shared like the details of like Celosia's breastfeeding stuff anywhere. Maybe I should do a podcast about it. Although it's like, I don't know what my point would really be. But when you said that, it just totally made me think of, there was a day, it was probably, I could look back and find out, but I think she was probably like 10 days old. And I remember calling you, Maren, or texting you and being like, I cannot do it one more day. I cannot. Like, I'm going to cry if I have to feed this child again. It hurts so bad. And I was going to say too, I think we talk a lot about like dogma at indie birth, and I think there's a lot of breastfeeding dogma too. And so I had gone into it with this like, I'm going to make it work. I got to just figure out her latch. I did have a lactation consultant come over like a few, like I think on day 3, maybe in day 5. And she's like, oh, just keep doing what you're doing. But it was so painful and it was not getting better. And I had a lovely woman who actually had been one of Mirren's clients. I had been at her birth. And she came over with like a bag of nipple shields when she heard that I was struggling, and I think some other like nice stuff too. And I called her the nipple shield fairy. But I think it was still a lot more days before I was willing to try it, because I had this idea that like, you're not allowed to use a nipple shield. Like that is going to ruin breastfeeding forever. It's the worst thing you could do. And so I was just like suffering through these like nursing sessions with this baby who was like so pissed all the time. And, looking back, I didn't use a nipple shield, I don't think at all with Arrow, but I remember being like, if it hurts that bad, I'm going to use one before they get so damaged, and then take even longer to heal. And I actually did end up having Celosia's tongue tie revised, lasered at 2 weeks old, because it still wasn't getting better. And it was like the last thing I could think to try. So anyways, yes, making the commitment for that day, and just wanting to share too, like the really beautiful experience. I think Maren came over that morning and like nursed her for me, which might make me cry. It's so sweet. And then like, I think 4 or 5 other women too came in that first 2 weeks before we did the tongue tie thing, which I never had any nursing pain with her again after we had the revision, but I still would not be the first person to say that it's a good idea. I think it was probably more a coincidence, and that my nipples just had a few days to heal finally, where I was using a shield and pumping and other people were helping. So what was I going to say? Yeah, so just the dogma around like, you must never, you must always, it like has to go this way. Like, yeah, it's hard. And that's again where I feel like I've had clients who I'm like, maybe they did jump to a shield too fast and it did kind of mess things up. But it's like, you never really can say for sure. And at the end of the day, like you're saying, Maren, you just have to find a way to like get through that day if it's challenging. And I feel like if people can just get through those first couple weeks, then they're usually golden. But yeah, it can be hard.
I'm thinking of a client I had whose baby wound up in the NICU like right after birth. The baby had aspirated meconium, and it was during COVID craziness, so they would not let her see her baby for 2 full weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And this was her first baby, and she didn't get to nurse the baby for the first 2 weeks. And it was so hard to watch. But it has such a happy ending because that baby's going to be 2 and is still nursing. So she figured it out. And like you are saying, like she did things. She probably used shields. I don't even remember. I mean, I helped as much as I could, but she was determined, especially since this baby had spent the first 2 weeks away from her. This was very important to her that she regain this relationship. And, it was so beautiful to watch. And at first I was kind of like, I didn't say it, but wow, like, I don't know, right? Your first 2 weeks away from a baby, like maybe not, but she did it. She just kept at it. And I think it was, probably like really peaceful for her in a way. Like imagine, right? Like no one wants to imagine that, but it made her appreciate it more perhaps, or just having that closeness and like knowing that she could bond with this baby and kind of like undo the trauma that had happened. And, she's a beautiful, very smart, well-adjusted child that is still nursing. So never say never.
It's pretty amazing.
Let's see. Oakley is asking about
Schedule.
Yeah, scheduled nursing. Well, again, we're talking about perspective differences here, and I don't want to, not recommend that someone seek help from a lactation consultant. I just will say that a lot of that training is very medical. So the way that a midwife will support breastfeeding, even without a certification, I don't have a certification. I just have 10 kids I've nursed and, hundreds of births that I've seen. The medicalized breastfeeding training is kind of you just get what you get. There are some really great people that know a lot and are super helpful. And there are some that just learn by a book, I think, and it's not super organic and maybe just not in line with you. That's kind of what it comes to at the end of the day. So nursing on a schedule, like, did someone read that in a book? Because that makes no sense. Why would you set a clock over a baby? Other than, let's say you had a preterm baby or something where you really did need to initiate nursing more often because the baby wasn't for some reason. I've seen that. And I would say that's one of the rare circumstances. But for a full-term baby, a normal full-term baby, don't ever wake a baby. Don't ever wake a baby. They will wake up when they need to nurse. And that is that. Otherwise, it becomes this like weird mechanical thing. This is my opinion. It has not worked for me. Not to say it couldn't work for some of you, but I don't understand that teaching. If you come to that on your own, go for it. I don't understand that teaching. Every baby has a different pattern. Of all my babies, all 10 babies, if I had written it down, which I didn't, but I can remember some, they all had different patterns. I remember my second baby nursed every 15 minutes of his life till he was 2 or something like that. I've said that on a podcast. It was extremely difficult. I was like totally exhausted. That was not my experience with the first one. So it was just different with him. And others have done different things, every couple of hours. Some have slept through the night at different times. So just because you've done it once, that's great. It gives you wisdom, it gives you experience, but you have a different baby in front of you and it'll be different.
And just speaking to the sleep part, Oakley, you had way up above said my baby wakes every 2 to 3 hours at night to breastfeed, still at 6 months. I'm so tired. I need help. My experience was that both my children, I mean, they had slightly different patterns, but both my kids woke up, the first one way more, but the second one for sure every couple hours at night to breastfeed till we night weaned, which was for him, when was that? Good Lord. He was almost 2. And so, yeah, for me, that was the hardest part of breastfeeding for me after those first few weeks was the being super tired. But side note, this goes back to that support and rest conversation, which is so crucial because if you do have a baby who's waking you up lots at night, or if for any other reason you feel like you need more rest and you're tired, like you need to have people around you who are supportive and will help you make that happen. Then if it's not at night, then during the day. So just a strong plug for involving anyone and everyone who possibly can be supportive. I actually felt like 6 months to like 18 months were the hardest in a lot of ways for that reason, because it was like, oh my gosh, I'm still not getting sleep and this is really hard and I'm so tired. So just wanting to normalize that a little bit for you, but also invite you to ask the people around you for help, which I know isn't always possible, but give it a whirl.
Many babies start to take in some solid foods, right? Around 6 months to a year, anywhere in there. There's no reason to force it. There's no, exact way to start it. That's a whole other topic. But for people that are really struggling, if your baby does want to eat on the earlier side of that normal, that definitely can bring some relief, even just mentally, right? To not feel like you're the absolute only source of sustenance for them, because it can become a really stressful thing, as we're saying, during that first 6 months when that's the case. Also, around 6 months ish to a year, same timing as the food, obviously, is like potential teething. So it really throws in all kinds of wrenches in a way to any kind of routine you may have had. And, biting sometimes comes up. But generally, it usually is more nursing, is what I've found. And nights can be rougher just because the teeth are on their way. So there's just different stages. And I'm saying that more that I hope it's helpful to know that, like, whatever stage you're in, you won't be there forever. It's just not the way it works. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Live if you're really having a hard time. And I think the fact that your baby has only gotten your milk in, bottle, breast, whatever, is really fantastic. And I hope that you do feel really proud of yourself, because that's an amazing gift.
Yeah, and that's like a whole other conversation, like the way that breastfed babies grow as opposed to, formula fed babies. My personal experience is that both my babies were like 50th percentile when they were born, right? They were like 7.4 and 7.8 or something, like super average. And then as they got older, they both are now in like the 5th percentile. And that happened pretty quickly after birth. Like they just didn't, but they weren't ever like miserable and never looked like unhealthy to me. But if I'd taken them to a pediatrician, I'm sure they would have tried telling me that they were not gaining well and that I should be concerned and all of the things. So I don't know your exact situation, but just saying that and I know I'm not alone. I've connected with a lot of women whose babies kind of did that. And they both are just little peanut people. We'll see where they end up, but
right. Genetics is a huge piece. And of my kids, I would say, it's been sort of 50-50. Like some have been sort of skinnier breastfed babies and the other half have been super chunky. And I couldn't tell you, I haven't done anything different. It's just their genetics. And agreed, the tiny ones, had I taken them to anyone, would have said they were too small. And actually, I remember taking one of the chunkier ones to a nurse practitioner, and she told me he was too fat. I'm like, you can't win in this world. Just do your best and feed your baby. The only thing I can think of with like, and again, is it real? Is it true failure to thrive? Like impossible for us to say, but it's just to really look at your diet, and make sure you're truly getting the calories and the fat that you need. Like that's really all there is to do. Make the best milk you can. And if you're doing that, your baby's body will do what it needs to do with that.
Which one was too fat? Was it true?
Yeah, she told me he was too fat, that I should stop nursing him all the time. And boy, did that make me angry. And this was a nurse practitioner that had never had children. So there was like this added, like, what did she even know? But she had been in practice for a long time. So she had seen lots of babies. But anyway, that's ridiculous. You cannot have a breastfed baby that's too fat. That's insane. Yeah, I mean, I think the advice, again, Liv, if I were to give any, and Margot kind of already said it, is to focus on nourishing yourself and your baby as much as you can and looking at your baby for the cues. I think that's one of the hardest things with a first baby. And maybe this is a topic for another day. Looking to the system, looking to like the numbers to tell you. And I know that's so tempting, but if it doesn't feel good and it brings stress, then you really may want to rethink that. Yeah, he just wants what he wants. I'm sure he'll tell you all about it when he gets older, and you'll see perfectly why it has been this way. Well, should we wrap it up here? Any last comments or thoughts from you?
I think we should wrap it up.
Yep, I think that's very telling. And that's, often my question to even pregnant women. Like, if you didn't know this result, if you didn't know this number, what would your intuition say? Right. And so if it's saying everything's fine, then that stress is not healthy for a mom or a baby. So I'm glad you're doing chiropractic as well. That's a great recommendation. And I'm sure he's healthy and thriving in the ways he needs to be. Don't let it get you down. All right, folks, thanks for joining us here. We do these every 2 weeks. So just get on our mailing list at indiebirth.org. You can get on our social, which is a free platform that we are happy for you to join and hang out there. You can find people in your area. You can ask questions, whatever. 13 Moons is our childbirth course, and it's a pay what you can course. Many of you here are in it. There's women all over the world in it. It's amazing. We have a doula academy. We have a midwifery school. And I think that's about it for today. So we will see you soon.
Sorry, I'm trying to put my computer's like really misbehaving. I just wanted to put the link for the school too. Over in the
also, this might not apply to many of the people here, but I do have a in-person retreat coming up in October on Oahu. So if you're interested in midwifery and radical midwifery, that might be something you want to check out. And let me find the link for that.
Yeah, what is the...
I know, it's such a...
I think I found it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you for these nice words about 13 moons. It really is so cool and a great resource. I think there is something else that we should share with them, but maybe not.
I don't know. So many things, but yeah, I don't know what next time's topic is. So we will see you there, but wishing everybody a happy full moon with all the energy shifts that are going on. Find your center. Take a couple of minutes for yourself today. I know I'm going to do that as well. And we'll see you back here in about 2 weeks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.